So Helena and I first saw ocean. I'm not sure what year it was, but it was an IONS conference in the desert. It could have been 99, something else like this. And we're moving toward the end of the conference. IONS is the Institute for Noetic Sciences, or of Noetic Sciences. Moving toward the end of the conference, and they introduce a young man who is a leader of other young leaders. So Ocean comes out and introduces his friends, as he says. All I remember is doing the Butterfly Hill, so that's all I remember. But this is that era when a number of people about this age began to do some extraordinary things. Probably for 10 years at that time, Ocean had been the founder and director of an organization called YES, Youth for Environmental Sanity. And he may tell you some of the story, maybe not. We'll see kind of what emerges here. But it was remarkable to see. I was younger then, but people, younger people kind of coming along and doing some remarkable things, and to see it right there on the stage. So we come across Ocean again on an interview. He was on the receiving end by Ryan Eliason, who was a co-founder of YES. This was on the Social Entrepreneurs. I said to Lena, we've got to have him at the conference. So of course we Google up and look at what he's doing, and he gave a talk which I'm afraid to even mention the name, but anyways, one of these awesome talks at a peace conference, and we thought, this is it, he is coming. Ocean now is, he's a grown man, with a wife, 2 children, special needs children, and has been a speaker now over the years. Several 100,000 people have heard him speak. So this is one of his remarkable gifts of storytelling and inspiration. Over 65 countries, so he gets around when he can to do this kind of work. He's on the board of several organizations. I think it's, let's say, Friends of the Earth, perhaps some other ones that I'm not aware of. And he's written a couple of books. They are at the bookstore, and we'll have once Sophia finishes, it'll be, just in case you want to buy one of these little books. Pass the Partnership?
The Power of Partnership.
Power of Partnership, thank you. And Choices for Our Future. And maybe some other little brochure you have, which is just marvelous. He also a recipient of a couple of awards, which would not surprise you. The Freedom Flame Award in 2008, and also the Jefferson Award for Outstanding Public Service for a person under 35 at the time. So Ocean is quite remarkable, and I just think we're really so fortunate to have him with us. So welcome, Ocean Robbins.
Thank you so much. It is really a pleasure for me to be here with all of you as well. I'm so grateful. Albert Einstein famously said, you can't solve a problem on the level on which it was created. You have to go to another level of consciousness. And so I think as we gather here together to explore consciousness and beauty and art and harmony and what it means to thrive and to be gasping in awe before the miracle of life, and then what it means to live that in the world in a way that brings healing and justice and sustainability and health and vitality to all of the people and all of the life forms of this planet, I think we're doing something pretty important. So I want to thank you for being on your own quest to understand what it means to really be you and to really be human and to really be alive in this world in these times. Your quest, whatever it means to you, to be of service, to be of contribution, to make a difference. We're living in troubled times. I think we all feel that in our own ways. And sometimes I look at the world and I can feel pretty overwhelmed. I'm 37 years old and I've gotten pretty exposed to the gap in my life between the beauty and the power of what's possible and what is, and also to the pain and the violence and the struggle we face. I've worked with leaders in over 65 countries, as Sheldon mentioned, and through their stories and their experiences, I've glimpsed firsthand many of the struggles we're up against. I think we're on a collision course with systemic environmental collapse. Every day on this planet, we have less topsoil, less clean, safe drinking water with which to grow food, and we have more and more and more mouths to feed. Every day on our planet, we have less ancient forests, and we have more pollution. We have more guns and more bombs. And so when you look at all these trends, it can be easy to feel overwhelmed. some people have talked since I was a little kid. I've been hearing stories about this expectation that we were going to see massive changes in the next generation. And I always grew up with this thought that humanity was either going to make it through this kind of rite of passage, this journey of transformation, or else we were going to see massive disaster, or both, perhaps. And I think we're living in a time where it's all happening at once, where the amount of suffering that is unfolding on this planet is inconceivable to our minds. But the amount of beauty and joy and richness and consciousness that is growing and unfolding and awakening is also inconceivable to us. And so in that gap, in that span, we step with our lives. And we look at how we can bridge that gap between whatever pains or struggles we face and the beauties and possibilities that we are here to help birth in the world. Sometimes people ask me if I have hope. And I've worked with different variations on my answer to that question. But where I am right now is I feel like I don't place my faith in a systematic analysis of the data, which can be pretty sobering. But I do place my faith in love, in the power of the human spirit, and perhaps the divine spirit to use us. I think every single one of us is an absolute miracle. If I had been alive 1,000,000 years ago and looked at the world and said, what are the odds that this group of people is going to be in this room right now in Mesa, Arizona? The odds wouldn't have been too high. But here we are, human beings of conscience and commitment, of inquiry and curiosity, exploring together. What does it mean to live with wonder? And what does it mean to bring that wonder to earth in a way that matters? So I want to thank you for being on this quest. I think we're not just here to survive and to make it through. I think we're here to thrive. I think we are here to rejoice in the beauty, the power, the magic, the wonder of life. And that is such a delight for me to live with that reality. I grew up in a kind of unusual family, and I want to tell you a bit of my family story. My grandfather started Robbins ice cream company, 31 flavors. So my dad grew up with an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in the backyard and a commercial freezer with 31 flavors of ice cream stocked at all times. He ate a lot of ice cream. He was being groomed from his very beginnings to one day join his father in the family company. He invented Jamocha almond fudge before he was 10 years old. He worked in the ice cream factory from a very early age, and his father really was grooming him to follow in his footsteps. But for my dad, he felt called in a different direction. And as he was coming of age, he realized that inventing a 30-second flavor wasn't why he was on this earth. So he ended up having to tell his dad, look, Dad, I know you've poured your heart and soul into making this company, and most people in my position would give their right arm for the opportunity to join you. But I'm going to have to say no. So he ended up walking away not only from the company, but from any access to the family wealth, because there were a lot of strings attached, and ended up moving with my mom to a little island off the coast of British Columbia, Canada, where they built a one-room log cabin, grew most of their own food, and lived on less than $500 a year. It was kind of a pendulum swing from a class perspective. So I was born in that cabin in the middle of the woods. My parents were doing yoga and meditating for several hours a day. And I grew up monetarily poor, but I grew up feeling rich because I had silence around me, I had beauty around me, and I had love around me. Then when I was 10, we moved to California, and my dad began working on a book called Diet for a New America, which came out in 1987. And it's about how our food choices affect our health, our happiness, and the future of life on Earth. Blake said you can find the universe in a grain of sand if you look deeply enough. And so in some ways my dad took the lens of food and opened up the universe to see what is the real impact of our food choices on our bodies, on our planet, on our spiritual unfolding. And his book struck people pretty deeply. It became a national bestseller, international bestseller actually. And the media called him the rebel without a cone. So I came of age, my dad was appearing on all these national talk shows, and there were about 20,000 letters a year coming in from readers thanking him for his work, and all these letters saying how it had saved their life and made such a difference. And that inspired me. It inspired me to think, what could I do to reach out to my generation? So in 1990, when I was 16 years old, I started YES, or Youth for Environmental Sanity, which was a nonprofit organization that initially had a national tour. We spoke to high school assemblies about the environment and what youth could do to make a difference in the world. So we traveled all across the country in an old Volkswagen van, and we spoke to high schools. We reached hundreds of thousands of students in over 40 states. And as we traveled the country, we kept encountering stereotypes, all the ways that people would categorize and judge each other based on cliques and groups and prejudice, and not based on what was really inside. So we made a list of the stereotypes we were hearing in schools. It went from A to Z, and it went like this. It was airhead, bimbo, cheerleader, druggie, environmentalist, flirt, gay, hippie, idiot, jock, kid, loser, mod, nerd, outcast, punk, queer, raver, skinhead, tease, ugly, virgin, weirdo, X generation, yuppie, and zero. And then we realized that we were traveling around, and people were hearing some environmentalists were coming to town, and they were getting some pretty crazy stereotyped ideas of what we were going to be like. Sometimes they thought we'd be like this. Hi everybody. According to scientists of the modern era, O3 in the upper stratosphere is interacting with oxides of nitrogen in a manner slightly different than was originally perceived in the mid-1980s. And then there were people who heard we cared about the earth, and they thought we'd be like this. Every time I see a tree being cut down, it's like a dagger was being thrust right through my heart. Save the trees! And then there were people who heard we were from California. They thought we'd be like this. Hi, all you beautiful people. We just have to open our hearts and love each other. Peace, brothers and sisters. But the truth is, we weren't any one of those things. We were all of those things. And a lot more. We were young people who cared, and we cared enough to speak out and take action and make a difference with our lives. As we traveled the country, we discovered we were not alone. We discovered that in community after community, people were rising up, taking action, and making a difference in ways big and small. We also discovered that the environment meant different things to different people. That to some people, the environment was stopping climate change and saving our forests. To other people, the environment meant gangs in concrete and trying to get home from school without getting shot. We discovered that to be an environmentalist, we had to broaden our own definition of the environment to include people as well as the planet. So that it meant becoming an activated force on behalf of the commons. It meant ceasing to be a helpless victim of problems we did not create and becoming actively engaged as a participant in the world around us. Becoming, as George Bernard Shaw said, a force of nature instead of a feverish clot of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making us happy. So as we traveled the country, we learned more and more about the courage and the commitment and the conviction of young people all across America who are making a difference. So our work evolved, and we started focusing on gatherings where we would bring together young leaders who were up to something in the world, to support them, to help them deepen their root system, to help them become more sustainable and more effective in their vital work. Because you know what we kept seeing? We kept seeing that the same problems that people were trying to change out there kept having a funny way of showing up in here. We kept seeing the truth in what Mahatma Gandhi said when he said we must be the change we wish to see in the world. And we saw how difficult that could be. How often social justice activists would get caught up in power struggles. How often environmentalists would be living unsustainably even as they're trying to work for sustainability. How often peace activists would get so mad they'd hit people over the head with their peace signs. And so we realized that to truly walk the talk and live the message isn't just a glib phrase or concept, it's a life's work. And so we started convening gatherings, looking at how we could deepen the root system, how we could be the change, how we could help people who are so committed to making a difference to learn together and learn from each other and understand each other. And as we brought people from many different backgrounds together, we saw how deep some of the divides can be. Divides like race, like class, like religion, like power, like nationality, like political perspective. And yet we're all in this together. And everyone brings their own unique perspective on where we're at and what's needed. And if we silence voices and we stifle conversation and dialogue and we just think we have it all figured out and everyone else just needs to know what we know and then everything will be fine, we lose so much. Because I think there are more than 7 billion parts to play in the healing of our world. Everyone's got a niche. Everyone's got a gift. Everyone's got a story and a perspective and a unique piece to bring to the collective unfolding of wisdom. We live in a time of unprecedented exchange of information. We can know things that are happening on the other side of the world in a matter of seconds. We can connect with people on the other side of the world instantly, even by video conference. Ideas are spreading faster and faster and faster. So this gives us an extraordinary opportunity, if we can learn to work more collaboratively, to have access to insights and perspectives that can absolutely change our perspective of the world we live in. When I was 10 years old, I had an interesting experience that informed my perspective on the world. My dad was working on Diet for a New America, and the first chapter he was working on at this time was about animals, and it's kind of making the case that animals may have more intelligence and more wisdom and more feelings than a lot of us realize or give them credit for. While he was in his room like 16 hours a day banging away in his old typewriter, we had a fruit fly problem in our house. And I'm not just talking about 1 or 2 fruit flies. I'm talking about like hundreds of fruit flies all over the house, particularly in the kitchen. And it had been going on for about 3 weeks. So we were trying to keep things really clean, but we just didn't know what to do to get rid of all these flies. One day my mom said, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to get a fly swatter. Now, I've been raised as a pacifist to believe in reverence for all life and nonviolence towards all beings. And here is my mother telling me she's going to buy a fly swatter. I was shocked. I had a little time to compose myself, and by the time she got back from the store, I cut her off at the door, and I said, you are not bringing that thing in this house. She said, what do you think we should do? Move out and let the flies take over? I said, I think we should consider it. She said, seriously, what should we do? I said, okay, give me 24 hours to use nonviolent means. So I wrote a letter. I said, dear fruit flies, we wish you the juiciest cow dung piles and the biggest compost heaps for you and all generations to come. However, we pay the rent here. You don't. We buy the food here. You don't. There's a lot of food that our limited stomachs can't eat and yours can, and that's why we have a compost pile. Please use it. I said, we must warn you. We have purchased a fly swatter. And we intend to use it if you are not gone by dawn tomorrow. I drew a little arrow on the note pointing to a window that I left open a couple inches. Posted the note up on the wall. Then I read it out loud, just in case some of the younger flies maybe couldn't read. This was about 4 in the afternoon. The next morning, when we woke up, there was not a fly in the house. Left the note up for a few weeks. Took the note down, flies started coming back. Put the note up, they were gone the next day. So what do we make of this story? Is it possible that a 10-year-old boy in some way communicated with fruit flies? I don't know. But if it's possible that a 10-year-old boy could communicate with fruit flies, do you think it's possible that we could communicate with each other? With all the reasons we could have to fear and mistrust each other? With all the centuries of violence and oppression and hurt feelings and wounds? Do you think it's still possible, somehow, some way, that we could communicate with each other? I think it is. And to that possibility, I dedicate my life. In India in 2003, we convened a gathering that we've convened for many years in a row called a World Jam. It's a gathering where 30 young leaders come together from 20 countries for a week of networking, skills sharing, and community building. One of the participants at this jam was Felicia. She's a philanthropist from France who funds helping social entrepreneurs get good ideas off the ground, giving them venture capital to get going. Another participant was Marilee Sanchez, and Marilee is from Colombia. She comes from a very economically poor family. When she was 10 years old, her best friend was murdered in Colombia's brutal, many decades running civil war. Marilee was heartbroken, and then she started the Children's Peace Movement of Colombia with some friends, dedicated to helping end the war, saying children need peace. And so they ended up getting over 2 million kids to sign a petition saying peace should be the first priority of the country. This inspired a grown-ups peace movement, and they ended up putting peace on the ballot in the next presidential election, saying peace should be the first priority of the country, and peace got more votes than any presidential candidate in Colombian history. So for this work, Marilee and a few of her friends were nominated 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize. At the age of 18, we discovered her and brought her to India for this World Jam. She and Felicia were roommates. So a couple days into the jam, Felicia came over to me and she said, I was just asking Marilee what she was planning to get for gifts for her family back home when she goes back to Colombia. While she's here in India, I thought she'd be getting something, and she told me she didn't have any money for gifts. And so I was wondering if I could give you $20 to give to her, and you could give it to her from an anonymous donor for gifts for her family. And I said, Felicia, I'm so touched that you would care about her and think about her in this way and want to contribute. And I said, can I just ask you a question, though? Why do you want the gift to be anonymous? And Felicia said, well, I'm afraid that if I give her the money, then she'll think I'm rich. And if she thinks I'm rich, then she'll want money from me, and she won't be honest with me anymore. And then she won't be a real friend anymore. And I've lost too many friendships over money. And this relationship means too much with me for me to let that happen again. And I said, Felicia, I'm so sorry that you've had that experience. That's so painful. And I said, we are at a jam here. We're building bridges across some of these divides and building real relationships. And I wonder what would happen if you told me everything, if you told Marilee everything you just told me. If you told her what your impulse was, and you told her why you almost didn't do it, and you told her what you were afraid of, and you told her about what's happened to you in your history. Felicia thought about that for a while, and she ended up deciding to do it. And I'll say that she was from one of the wealthiest families in the world. So issues around money and class have been with her entire life, from having bodyguards accompanying her to public school all the way through. And she shared some of that struggle with me as well, and how hard she tried to just be normal so that she could have real friends and not constantly be seen as a source of money everywhere she went. She said it made it so hard to trust people when she thought they were seeing her that way. So she told Marilee all of that, and they ended up having an hours-long conversation about class and about money and about power and about relationships and about what authentic friendship really means. And it seemed like a lot of to-do about $20. But of course it wasn't about $20. It was about how people from very different class contexts can have real authentic relationship and can really work together across those divides. On the last day of the jam, Marilee was sharing that this jam had meant so much to her, and she said that her family had been saving up money for about 10 years to try to be able to buy their own home in Bogota's largest slum. They had saved about $2,500. They needed about $2,500 more to buy their home. And when she heard about the jam and she thought about coming, she felt a little guilty. She said that she thought that the amount of money it would cost to get her to India would be like enough to pay for her family's home. And so she felt like, what was it justified for her to take this opportunity when the money could do so much? She said, but I didn't come to this world so that I could buy homes. I came to this world so that I could help the children. And this gem has been worth more than 7 homes because it's helped me realize that I need to be sustainable and take care of myself if I'm going to be able to keep giving to the world I love and the children I love. And I feel like I wasn't going to last more than a couple more years the way I was going because I was burning myself out. So I'm so grateful, she said. I was very touched by that, and I was also concerned for her because I heard in her story the struggle of survival that her family faced. So Mary Lou went home, and 3 weeks later her father, who was the income earner for their family of 7, died suddenly in a car accident. And Mary Lou wrote to the Jam community and shared what had happened, and people responded with love and prayers and sharing their own stories of how they had been through the loss of their own parents or loved ones. And there was a tremendous outpouring of love and prayers and support. And then Felicia did something more. She ended up sending a gift that was enough to cover all the burial costs, to help the family be able to buy their home, and to be able to make it through a tough time so Mary Lou's work could continue. And I know that Felicia would not have done that if they hadn't spent hours talking about $20. And she did so not from a place of guilt, but from a place of what we could call authentic partnership. It wasn't like person A gives to poor person B, and person B feels guilty and indebted, and person A feels self-righteous and proud. It was more like person A and person B are united for a higher common vision. In this case, the common vision was peace on earth, was peace and nobility for the children of Colombia. In this case, Mary Lou's life and work are so dedicated, and Felicia felt and knew that, and she knew that she could partner with her friend, and together something beautiful would be sustained and supported. Not 2 months after that, 700 soldiers from one of the militant groups came into Bogota and laid down their arms and made a very public statement. And what they said was, we believe our cause is righteous and just, but we believe that the cause of peace is more righteous and just. And we believe that the children have spoken, and the children of Colombia need peace. So we are laying down our arms to rejoin civil society because we want peace too. Now, Mary Lou was one part of a lot that made that possible. The struggle continues. The Civil War rages on. But Dr. King said the arc of history is long, yet I believe it bends towards justice. And sometimes we have these experiences, or we can witness the arc of history bending. And every time that happens, I bow in reverence and gratitude. In the last century, women earned the right to vote in the United States. That was a struggle that had been going on for centuries before. 2 pillars of history, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, worked for more than 75 years each, committing their hearts and souls and lives to earning the right to vote for women. They inspired millions, but they died without ever seeing that right manifest in this country. It took another 30 years before the women's suffrage movement finally bore fruit on a national level. In the last century, we've witnessed so many changes around race and the right to vote for all people of all colors. And the struggle continues. And there are countless ways that injustices are perpetuated and people are silenced and people feel disenfranchised economically, morally, or even politically. But we do see that human beings of conscience and goodwill have the capacity to awaken the conscience of the collective. Time and again we witness that. Dr. King said you have no moral authority with those who can feel your underlying contempt. So what does it mean to really stand for something boldly and courageously, even ferociously at times, and yet to do so in a way that honors the dignity and the nobility of all human beings and all life? Because as Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to destroy an enemy is to make him or her a friend. And we see so many instances where we become strident and passionate and fundamentalist, don't we? And then we create enemies needlessly. We create polarities. We demonize each other. And I'm really interested in what does it mean to have a fierce and courageous and bold and uncompromising stand for justice, while at the same time having a fierce and bold and uncompromising stand for love. For the love that exists in everybody, so that we don't need to obliterate and destroy dignity and beauty and love even as we are willing to stand up for something, to make waves sometimes, to say, you know what, some of the things that we see happening in the world demand that we get off the sidelines and live our conscience. Because the status quo, the conventional modus operandi is not cutting it if we want our future generations to have a safe world to live in. If we want ourselves to have a safe world to live in. So it's time for bold and radical change. But I think that bold and radical change must originate in changes in evolution of consciousness and then be manifest in evolutions in change and action. And I can tell you that as we step into this work, we're not alone. That everywhere there's war, there are people working for peace. Everywhere there's environmental destruction, people are working for sustainability. Everywhere there's injustice, people are standing up for justice. The movement for transformation and healing and beauty is broad and vast and deep. And we truly stand on the shoulders of giants as we grow forward. Because human beings, for all of our flaws and all of our struggles, we've made it through many, many epochs of time. And here we stand. Here we sit. Here we live. And I have such reverence and gratitude for the miracle of life. I'm witnessing a miracle right now in my own life. I'm the father, as Sheldon mentioned, of 10-year-old twin boys. And they're on the autism spectrum. So what this means is that at 10 years old, they're still not potty trained. There's a lot of struggles they face just day to day. They weren't talking until they were 5. Every single developmental milestone has come really, really late for them. And in fact, up until 5, we didn't know if they would ever speak. And still at 10, there are many questions about what kind of future they might have before them. The conventional belief system about autism is that it's a life sentence. Western medicine doesn't really have much to offer autistic kids. I mean, you can train them to behave a little better, but the fundamental core issues are not answerable by any drugs or any surgery or any particular protocol that's been widely adopted in this country. Autism is growing rapidly. It's now afflicting 1 out of 110 kids in this country. It's a 20-fold increase in less than a generation. So most of us probably know somebody who is affected by this. And so in my own journey as a father, I've gone through my struggles, my hopes and fears, like all parents do. As well as being autistic, my kids are a lot more than that. Their spirits aren't autistic. Their spirits are joyous and beautiful and courageous and loving, like perhaps every child. And they struggle sometimes with things that come very easily to a lot of people. They can still barely write their names. And so we've been on this journey, and one of the things that this is teaching me is about love and what love really means. You see, my grandfather started Baskin Robbins. My father was is a best-selling author who's made such a difference. I started a nonprofit organization when I was 16 and have always identified as fairly precocious. And I thought with my wife that when we had kids, they would be, superstars of social change. I mean, I figured by the time they were 5 or 6, we'd be talking about, the meaning of life and life after death and, just debating reincarnation. And instead, we're on a whole other trajectory. At 5 or 6, they weren't even talking. And so I've had to face the ways that I have pushed myself, have made my love for myself somewhat conditioned upon what I would accomplish. My dad used to say when I was a kid that he loved all that I accomplished and all that I did. And I was off to a pretty early start. I mean, I organized a peace rally when I was 7 years old, started a bakery when I was 10. But he would say, for all your accomplishments, I want you to know that I would love you just as much if you were autistic. And now here I am, and I've got kids who are autistic, and I have to ask myself, do I love them just as much the way they are as I would if they were clearly on the fast track to brilliant global change? And while at one level that answer might seem glib or easy, at another level it's taken a lot of soul searching and a lot of inner work and a lot of willingness to really come to terms with what is so in my life and in the world. Because you know what? If our love for our children is unconditional, then our love for anything can be unconditional. See, if I can love my kids just as much as they're autistic, can I love my world just as much with all of its flaws and struggles? Can I love humanity just as much with all of the violence that mars our collective experience as I would if we were in utopia, or what I might have defined as utopia? And I'm learning step by step how to receive the blessings that my children are offering me and the lessons that they're teaching me that I don't think I could have really learned any other way. I'm learning what it means to love them just the way they are, because every child is precious and beautiful and whole and perfect just the way they are and deserves to be loved just the way they are. And then I turn that inward and I say, okay, what would it mean? And what does it mean to look at the places where my love for me has been conditioned upon certain performance and certain expectations, and then I look at a kind of perfectionism that can almost be ruthless, that drives and then criticizes constantly, as if that was a form of love, was to constantly have some voice going on in my head that was berating me for all the things that I could have done better or should have done better or should have done different. And then I say, you know what? That's the same violence that destroys nations. So how can we learn to silence those voices and listen to another voice? Maybe we don't shut those voices down. Maybe we just, like a radio station, we just tune to a different dial. And instead of listening to voices of destruction or meanness or self-hate, we listen to voices of love and dignity and respect and beauty. Maybe they're all playing at once. And maybe no one of those stations is inherently correct. Maybe we get to choose what we attune to, what frequency we attune to. And then we get to live with the results of that choice. So I'm exploring what does it mean to love me just because. So that my service and my accomplishments and my actions don't come from the need to prove something so that my ego can feel at peace. They come from a genuine love, a genuine passion, because it's what is so and what is emergent within me. And I believe that foundation of action has a whole different quality as it ripples out through the world. We've also discovered a program. It's called Sunrise. And it's a way of working with autism that is miraculous. And the Sunrise program has trained about 20,000 families in its work, and we've seen many, many, many hundreds of full recoveries from autism, which is statistically considered virtually impossible, but it's happening. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have had dramatic improvement. And the Sunrise program's core thesis is very compatible with what I'm talking about here. The core thesis is that autistic kids are overwhelmed by the information that comes at them. They don't know how to filter out all the extraneous information and just focus on one thing. So like I'm talking to you right now, but they would also be hearing the sound of the fan, and they'd be overwhelmed with all the different lights and stimulus in the room, not just looking up at me. So what they do in this state of overwhelm is that they tune out a lot of the world and they go into places that are familiar or comfortable. It's called isms or stimming, and they focus in on that, and they'll do the same thing over and over again for long periods of time. And conventional sort of medical treatment of autism is that you try to train that out of them. You stop them by rewarding them for not doing that and punishing them for doing that, systematically and consistently. Whereas the Sunrise program says, you know what, kids are doing this for a reason, because they need to feel safe, and they feel insecure and overwhelmed. So rather than punishing them or trying to change their behavior, you actually join them. So for example, you would actually role play and find delight in doing exactly what your kid's doing when they're going into their own inner world. And then suddenly they realize they've got company. And then suddenly the core deficit of autism, which is lack of contact with the outside world, lack of eye contact, lack of relational capacity, is a little different because they've got company. So for example, my son River, one of his isms, he loves to chew on, he's into Barbies, and he loves to chew on their feet for long periods of time. So one day, instead of trying to take the Barbie away and get him to do something more productive, I decided to join him. So I'm sitting there hanging out with him, and he's chewing on his Barbie's foot. So I pick up another Barbie, and I'm sitting there across the room chewing on her foot. And then River looks at me. Now, he doesn't often look at people, but he's fascinated. He's like, whoa, what are you doing? He looks at me, and then he smiles. It's like, oh, he finally caught on. I could hear him, like, in his head, he's thinking, I've been trying to show him how cool this is for years. He finally figured it out. So he's totally smiling at me, looking at me. We're chewing on Barbies, hanging out together. And then he points to, he's got his Barbie right here, one foot. He points to the Barbie and shows me that I could chew on the other foot of the same Barbie. So I come over, and we're 3 inches apart from each other, looking at each other's eyes, beaming, chewing on the respective feet of his Barbie. And I would glow. Now, one thing I never got when my kids were little was eye contact. I never got to just sit and look in my baby's eyes and feel the connection of our souls melting together. Never got that. But here I was at 10 years old, chewing on a Barbie's foot and having the most eye contact I'd ever had with River in my life. And we're smiling at each other. And I got there because I went with joining into his world. So the idea is that they show you the door in, and then you can show them the door out. That when you honor their world, they feel safe, and then they're willing to check out your world. That also means accepting them just the way they are. And I find something really interesting about that. Because I think that if you're going on a journey, and you got a map, you're like, okay, I want to get, over here. The only way you can really figure out how to get here is if you know where you are right now, right? And then you can start, if you figure out where you are right now, then you can figure out a course and track your way to get there. And a lot of times in life, I think we can focus so much on where we want to get to or what's wrong about the world that we don't just recognize that what is so is so. And we cannot get anywhere else if we don't land in this place, in this time, with all of our supposed flaws and struggles, with all of our supposed beauties and opportunities. It's all part of who we are. So here we are. In my journey of being here, I am constantly exploring what does it mean to let go of all the stuff, all the clutter that gets in the way of that presence. And I had an experience a few years ago I want to share with you that was very meaningful for me personally and on my spiritual path. I was in Jordan. I've been working with a group of young leaders in the Middle East every year, bringing together people from about 14 countries throughout the Middle East to explore what does real partnership look like and have honest dialogue, but also look at how do we break out of conventional conversations. There's so much conflict over there, over religion and national lines and so many other issues. And we're exploring what does it mean to get out of the debates and get into real transformational relationship building and partnerships and do the personal healing work that's needed to be able to have breakthroughs. So I was over there and I was feeling a lot with the stories I've been hearing. Because the reality in the Middle East, how many of you have ever been to the Middle East, broadly speaking? Okay. So there's such rich culture and such deep history. And I found myself in Jordan going down to the edge of the Dead Sea one day where this is the lowest point on earth. And as I was passing through this land, I was thinking, this is the land of the prophets. And this is soil that has been for millennia upon millennia soaked with sweat and human labor, soaked in blood with centuries and centuries and centuries of violence, soaked in tears with all the sadness and sorrows that people have known, soaked with the prayers that permeate the land, that run so deep, in a land where people really place faith and religion above all else in their lives in many, many cases. And as I felt the history and the depths of the wounds and the depth of the human longing for meaning and purpose and right life, I was very moved. And I was also very saddened because I felt how intractable many of the lines are and many of the divisions are, how deep the divisions run. And I wound up going to a hot springs waterfall with our jam participants. on the edge of the Dead Sea. So this is a natural hot springs waterfall, and there's water pouring down so powerfully you can barely stand up under it, and it's about 105 degrees, and it's right on the edge of the Dead Sea, and it's spectacularly beautiful. And I stood under this waterfall, being absolutely pummeled by this water that was so intense I could barely stand, and I felt like I was being cleansed, and I felt like I was being challenged in a very real way to let go of all the stuff, all the attachments, all the clutter that was not fundamentally me. And I found myself weeping as I came out of that waterfall. And a prayer came to me that I've continued to repeat every day since then. I said, help me to release all ambition, all attachment, all desire for all that is not so. Help me to embrace totally with all that I am, all that is real. Now, this is not a prayer of complacency. It's not a prayer that says, okay, I'm just going to give up and let everything be whatever it is. There is an acceptance. But there's also an embrace of what is, and part of what is the hunger for change. Part of what is the reality that there exists in us the seeds of what can be. There exists in us the hunger, the burning passion to live the life we were meant to live on this precious earth. That's not an ambition or attachment. That's truth. And if we can align ourselves with that truth, we have such power within us. We have such glory within us. We have such capacity within us. Because you know what? We're not alone. We have the power of all ancient ones, all great ones, all divine forces moving within us when we align ourselves with what can be. We have the power of the human spirit and all that inspires and moves through the human spirit, guiding us, beckoning us, inviting us on our true and authentic path. I define a miracle as a beneficent experience that exceeds the bounds of my previous worldview. Based on that definition, how many of you have ever experienced a miracle? So, I would like to invite you right now to go ahead and think about some experience of the miraculous that you have felt in your life. And if you really don't identify with that concept, then just think about some really cool thing that happened. Okay, and I'm going to invite you to go ahead and pair up right now with somebody near you. They might be behind you or in front of you or next to you. Go ahead and find a partner right now. And for the webcast, you can just continue to, you can also join in this by thinking about this, or if you're with anybody else right now, you can also do this little exercise and share with them. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do right now, everybody, raise your hand if you don't have a partner right now. Okay, go ahead. Okay, there we go. All right, pick a person A and a person B. Okay, all A's raise your hand. A's raise your hand. Okay, all B's raise your hand. All right, very good, very, very good. Okay, so now person B is going to go first. And you've got 1 minute. So this is just concise, to the point, to share a time when you experienced something miraculous or something really cool. Person A, you're just going to listen. Go ahead and start. Go ahead and switch whenever you're ready. Give person A a turn to switch. Okay, and bring your sharing to a completion. Okay, thank you. So, how many of you, yeah, go ahead and thank your partner. So how many of you learned something new about your partner just now? How many of you think they're the coolest person ever? You better raise your hand. Okay, well, if your partner shared something that touched you or inspired you just now, I'd like to invite you to just share that with us. So I think we have a microphone that can move around. Is that true? Yeah? Okay. Great. So go ahead and raise your hand if you're comfortable just sharing something that may have touched you that you just heard.
Where are the bold ones?
Well, I was just very touched by Finley sharing with me that as his mother was passing over, and it was a couple of year process, the quality and the depth of the love that came from her to him, and he didn't know that that depth was there because he had a difficult childhood with her. So that it came out in the end in such a profound way. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Krista and I are married, and we were remembering together a miraculous event. We volunteered caring for the terminally ill, and we're remembering a time where we were doing smudges for a Native American who was dying in one room, and then there was a Hindu monk that was caring for his father in the room beside that. There was a rabbi doing a tour of the place, and there were two Catholic nuns that were volunteering there. And we were thinking, that really is miraculous. And all was peace. All was focused on service, and all was focusing on helping one another. And that was a small miracle, I think.
Thank you.
Where else? Who else?
I'm good. William was sharing an experience with me when he was 8 years old. He had a mystical experience, and he could put it in context. And at 8 years old, I mean, who does that? My first one was 42 years old, you know? He actually saw, in the middle of the night, he saw his father carrying his brother up the stairs to the attic. And he called out to him, and they weren't really there. And then he realized that was the concept of the father carrying you up. 8 years old. Isn't that amazing?
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else burning to share? We can go on. Okay. Thank you. So for me, it gives me a lot of hope. I know I started out early on talking about hope. It gives me a lot of hope to know that as much as it is up to us, it's also not up to us. As much as life depends on us doing what we can, as much as the choices that we make send out ripples and impact a whole lot of people and a whole lot of things, there's also a level on which the transformation that is beckoning or emerging is emerging through us, and we have the sacred opportunity to be used in service, to be a vehicle of life, of love, of healing, of justice, of beauty. And as we surrender into that, as we align our willpower and our intention with a force greater than ourselves, we find doors opening. We find miracles unfolding. We experience the miracles that were already there with new eyes. We find our hearts and minds opening to perceive the world more deeply and more beautifully. My friend Lynn Twist says, what we appreciate appreciates. Wherever we apply our consciousness, there's a funny tendency for it to grow. My wife and I have played with this quite a bit, because when she appreciates me, I become a whole lot nicer. And it is amazing how much more effective "thank you for doing the dishes" is than "I wish you'd do the dishes just once for inspiring me to do the dishes." And so I think we're learning right there a universal law as we negotiate the dishes in the home, that when we bring appreciation and love and beauty to our seeing, we help to bring it into the world, into manifestation. So I want to walk in beauty. I want to walk in delight and joy and thriving and magic and awe and wonder. Not because that's inherently more a correct way to perceive the world than a view of cynicism and despair and death and destruction, but it sure is a lot more fun. And I think it helps get us more where we want to go. I was with, last night I had dinner with a dear friend who's a professional musician, and we were talking about harmony. And I was referring to harmony and living in harmony as if it was kind of like we're all going to be the same, or we're all going to get along. And I said, how does harmony fit with diversity? And he said, harmony is diversity. So you can't have harmony if you don't have different notes, right? They just have to, they just relate to each other. So to be harmonious is to be who we are, and to have other people be who they are, and we live in that and live from that, and yet we're interacting with each other with respect, perhaps even with reverence sometimes. And that's what harmony means. So I'm wondering if you have any reflections or comments or questions for our remaining time that I'm with you on this stage tonight. Back there.
What's your other son?
Sherry.
What's the other twin's name?
We have two boys. One is Bodhisattva, actually. That came to me in a dream before he was born. And the other one is River Dharma. Yeah. And we say that the ocean refuses no river. People ask me why we didn't name Bodhi Lake, and I say, well, came in a dream, so had to go with that.
I just wanted to say that what you've shared with us tonight has been completely harmonious with what's going on here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, one more.
I was especially touched by the learning experience that came to you about unconditionality. I mean, you just wouldn't expect to get it that way, but it's just so beautifully appropriate.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank you as well for having been so open and so honest about your personal experience in life and just the complexity of your particular personal path, that is sharing in such an authentic, open way. It invites us to share so authentically, and giving us the opportunity to share with one another, and I just feel like it's been such an experience of open-heartedness combined with open-heartedness and inspiration. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I just ask Ocean just
One more. Okay.
we think about sometimes the power of seeing the future happening right now in some places, and what it would be like to see that writ large. Do you have something that's happening that you see kind of looking out that really gives you great joy and hope at this time, in addition to what you've shared with us so far?
I'm excited by the way that the silos are breaking down. The way that all of the issues that we're working on are starting to more and more be interconnected visibly. And people are working together that might not have worked together before. We have to. You know, if we just work on our one issue and someone else is working on their one issue, we're going to be compromised in our effectiveness. We can work on an issue, but let's realize how radically interdependent we all are, how interconnected we all are, how personal development and community well-being and systemic change are all interconnected, how our spiritual paths and our reverence are connected to how we show up and act in the world. These things all intersect, and I'm also seeing a lot of different kinds of change makers working together across historic divides, and that inspires me. And I'm also seeing a lot of breakthroughs as economics lines up with social impact. As we're seeing, for example, with the environmental movement, more and more companies focusing on energy efficiency, saving large amounts of money, and also doing a good thing for the earth. I think that healthcare is another place. It's 15% of the GDP in this country. It's bankrupting so many families, medical costs, and so many companies because they can't afford to provide healthcare for their employees because the costs are going up and up and up and up and up. And yet we're focusing on disease care more than we're focusing on health and wellness. So I think there's an incredible opportunity because there are known ways that individuals can become healthier and training programs that help people be healthier. So what would happen if corporations started to implement, spending money on that and saving money on healthcare? Whole Foods is doing this. My dad's working with them, and they spend about $250 million a year on healthcare for their employees. 80% of that spending goes to 20% of the employees' needs. So they're focusing on that 20% and giving them trainings in health and documenting how much money they're going to save by making these shifts, by helping their people be healthier. And I think that there's the potential in this, as we focus on health and wellness, to save so much money and to create higher quality of life for our populations. It's just one example. I think there are many examples where we can start to think outside the box and get out of dysfunctional systems that are making nobody happy and have breakthroughs to build a better world. So as we move towards closure, I want to say I'll be available at the end of the evening's programming in the back in that next room. I'll be at a table and I'll be signing copies of The Power of Partnership and some other resources, and happy to answer more questions and engage more with you if you like. And also I'll be leading a workshop tomorrow. I see I'm almost out of time. I'd love to share one closing poem before I wrap up from Samuel Ullman, because I work a lot with young people. And I'm 37, so I don't know whether you consider me young or not, but my sons do not. But Samuel Ullman spoke about the power of the youth, and he said it's not a time of life, it's a state of mind. It's not a matter of rosy cheeks, red lips, or supple knees. It's a matter of the will, a quality of the imagination, a vigor of the emotions, a freshness of the deep springs of life. Youth means a temperamental predominance of courage over timidity, of an appetite for adventure over a love of ease. This often exists in an adult of 60 more than a youngster of 16. For we grow old not merely by a number of years. We grow old by deserting our ideals. Years may wrinkle the skin, but to give up enthusiasm wrinkles the soul. Worry, fear, self-distrust bows the heart and turns the spirit back to dust. Whether 60 or 16, there is in every human being's heart the lure of wonder, the unfailing childlike appetite of what's next. In the center of your heart and my heart, it's as if there were a wireless station. So long as it receives messages of beauty, hope, cheer, courage, and power from people and from the infinite, so long are you young. So I want to close by honoring the youthful spirit in all of us and the elder in all of us, the wisdom of experience and the brilliance of infinite possibility. And I want to thank you very much.